Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Edge of Venomverse miniseries as we take a look at Edge of Venomverse number 3, and well, let's talk about the Ghost Rider. Now, odds are there are some of you who probably know who the Ghost Rider is, if at least not from the comics, then from the Nicolas Cage movies, but for the few of you who have no idea who the Ghost Rider is, allow me to explain based on my limited knowledge. The Ghost Rider is a title that has been passed around to many people in the Marvel Universe. The main shtick with each holder of the title is that they are typically a person who, for one reason or another, has found themselves bound to a demonic spirit. Usually the spirit of a demon known as Zarathos that, when bound to their souls, ends up giving them the ability to transform into the Ghost Rider, and what usually triggers the transformation is that they have to be in the presence of evil souls, and once in their presence, they end up transforming into the Ghost Rider, and it's their job to essentially, well, enact punishment against evil, make the sinners pay for their sins, and so on and so forth. And typically, as the name Ghost Rider implies, they typically have some kind of motor vehicle or something that they ride around on. Okay, well, I say motor vehicle, but really they can be riding on anything. Apparently, the earliest Ghost Rider in the Marvel Universe rode on a fucking woolly mammoth, and there was one who rode on a horse, but most of the time, they usually are riding on some kind of motor vehicle. Usually a motorcycle, as that's the one that's most associated with the Ghost Rider. However, like I said, the spirit has been passed. The title of Ghost Rider has been passed around for a while, and for anyone who's seen the Nicolas Cage movies, you may be familiar with Johnny Blaze as the original Ghost Rider, which he was. The most current holder of the title, at least as far as I know, is actually a boy by the name of Robbie Reyes, a Latino kid who wound up becoming the Ghost Rider, well, through kind of a fluke. Basically, he wound up coming into possession of a car that was haunted by the spirit of a Satanist, so to speak, by the name of Eli. Eli in life was, well, not a nice guy, and prior to his death, he had enacted dark rituals that allowed him to not only stay on Earth and haunt his car, but also gave him very much demonic abilities, and thus when Robbie came into possession of his car, Eli wound up binding himself to Robbie's soul, and through Eli's influence, Robbie wound up becoming the newest incarnation of the Ghost Rider, with the car acting as his mode of transportation, so to speak. Now, while Eli was a bastard, a monster who continually would tempt Robbie into doing dark things regardless of the situation, Robbie himself was a good kid who wanted to make good, who wanted to do good in the world, make right by his brother, actually be a positive influence on the world. And so while Robbie and Eli never really saw eye to eye on certain things, Robbie did his best to try and work with the spirit of Eli and use the powers that he had been cursed with to actually do some good around the neighborhood, not just for everybody else, but also for his younger brother. However, what if the good Mr. Reyes picked up a second parasite, one that was less of a hellish incarnation and more of a extraterrestrial variety? What if the good Mr. Reyes bonded with the symbiote? And that's what today's issue is going to be discussing. As for today's comic, which, as I mentioned on Tuesday, we're going to be seeing what happens when you mix the Spirit of Vengeance with the Venom symbiote. And the story actually begins, well, with S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah, basically the story actually opens with S.H.I.E.L.D. as they're in the middle of a prisoner transport. Basically what's going on is that they are transporting the supervillain by the name of, I want to remember his name and they actually say it. They want to transport the supervillain Dr. Calvin Zabo, aka Mr. Hyde, to his trial, and unfortunately, this guy is very much a big name target. And basically they know that if they try and transport him to his trial, there's a good chance he's going to be intercepted on the way there, but if just by various people who have a grudge against him. So basically security is tight. And while there are other methods for transporting him to the courthouse, for one reason or another, they're all shut down. They could fly him, but they think it's too risky. They could teleport him, but teleporters can get hacked. So sadly, they gotta do this the old-fashioned way and transport him by a convoy. And so, as such, the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., I don't remember her name. I don't even know if it's mentioned at any point. Well, let's see if it is, because I think it is. No, she said. Yeah, it's never said who the head of all this is. Basically, the head of this little transport pretty much just warns all of her men that they're going up Shit's Creek without a paddle, but they have to try their best. And sure enough, once they load up Mr. Hyde onto his transport and everybody moves out to get him to his trial, immediately things start going wrong as one by one people start showing up who want a piece of the good Mr. Hyde. First, there's a sniper who tries shooting them down, which they're able to take care of rather easily, but then one by one more threats start popping up, including these flying monkeys with jetpacks, these vampires riding around in dune buggies, the fucking mafia who want him because he has dirt on them. There are these apparently weird purple whatevers that are a mix of embryonic fluid and eggplants. And there's even a fucking mercenary that is a fusion between Sasquatch, Doc Ock, and Deadpool called Octo Squatchpool, who was apparently hired by the family members of his victims to get revenge. It pretty much just goes balls to the walls insane. And while everything in Dr. Zabo's transport is going fine, as no one's been able to breach it, on the outside, everything's going to hell in a handbasket, and it's just fucking insane. As such, however, throughout all this, Dr. Zabo is just kind of sitting back and just letting it all happen as if nothing's really bothering him. And while the lady in charge of all these things is just looking at him like, you are one sick fucker, you know that? So pretty much on the outside, her men are getting slowly but surely overrun. They can't deal with all this at once, and sadly, they're being beaten back the heat's just getting too hot. They need to. With even the idea of just abandoning this guy and running for the hills being thrown out. However, before even any shield man manages to retreat, a new player enters the fray as we start seeing flaming spikes and chains just start flying all over the place and knocking it and either wrapping people up or knocking them aside. And so as the comic gets ahead, the guy who initially wanted the retreat looks and sees what's going on and asks, what the hell is that? And it's here we see the venom of this world. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can manage to find the panel that this guy first appears in, allow me to introduce you to the Host Rider. A fusion of the Ghost Rider and Venom. And as you just saw from that little introductory shot, the guy is metal as fuck. His basic design his basic design is that the groundwork is clearly the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider, as he still has the skull head and the racetrack bodysuit that Robbie typically wears when he's going out doing his whole Ghost Rider shtick. However, what differentiates him and showcases that he is different from the regular Ghost Rider is, for one thing, the skull he has, it actually opens up and you can see what looks like a flaming tongue inside wrapped in chains, and his body is now a lot buffer and bigger. And while the basic design on his suit mostly resembles Robbie's, it also has elements of the Venom symbiote spider in there that kind of lash out. And what makes and of course, to kind of complete the whole ensemble, the car that the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider typically rides around in, it's now alive. And the wheels are now like detached and are like the wheels are kind of sort of detached from the car and are only connected via these twisted strands. It's got a mouth on the outside that can literally eat people. It's metal as balls, and I kind of fucking love it. And the instant he shows up, he just hits the ground running and does not stop as he just starts plowing through these armed forces one by one. And basically, when the lady in charge of all these things looks outside and sees the Ghost Rider, or the Host Rider, she's like, "Oh wait, is that the Ghost Rider? What's he doing here?" To which Dr. Zabo's like, "Wait, the Ghost Rider? He wasn't part of the plan." Which confuses the lady in charge of all this and says, "What the hell are you talking about?" To which Zabo reveals that he just knew that something, it's just a feeling he has in his bones, so to speak. And Yeah, kind of spoilers here. Dr. Zabo set this whole thing up. Basically, he was aware that he had a lot of enemies that if they had caught wind that he was being transported this day, they would want his head on a pike. So, using his one phone call, he made a deal with the mercenary known as Crossbones, and basically what Crossbones was supposed to do was just get the word out to all of his enemies, let him know that he was being transported on this day, so that they would all come in guns blazing and want to take him out. And in the midst of the distraction, Crossbones would come in, save his life, and just set him free, and thus basically this. In other words, he wanted to use his enemies as a smokescreen. However, but the thing is, the Ghost Rider was not part of the plan, or the Host Rider. I have to remember to call him that. So Dr. Zabo is a little confused as to why he's here. And he even tells his escort to remain calm. But in the meantime, his escort, which again I have to remind you is the lady in charge of all this, as she looks outside and sees the Host Rider performing, she ends up taking note of his suit and sees that it isn't that and sees the gooiness. And we also learn, and it's here that we learn a little strange thing, that apparently in this reality, Spider-Man's dead. Yeah, apparently in this universe, around the 80s, Spider-Man wound up kicking the bucket. I'm guessing it had something to do with the symbiote, but don't quote me on that. But the point is, they actually do recognize. But basically, she does remember that at some point, Spider-Man did wear the suit, and apparently it was noted to have some weaknesses. Case in point, it's supposed to be weak to fire. So why is it bonded with the guy whose head is a literal flaming skull? So this is a little confusing for the lady in charge of this. But in the midst of all this chaos, Octo Squatchpool ends up seeing the Host Rider and wants to engage him in battle. But before he did that, he was dealing with more Shield agents and on their own armored convoy. And just as the Octo Squatchpool jumps off to go face the Host Rider, it ends up knocking the thing away, and we see the Host Rider seemingly saves the agents as it ends up thwipping, and another little awesome tidbit, instead of shooting webs out of his wrist like Venom, he shoots fucking chains, and that's, again, it's fucking awesome. Awesome, and he does manage to apparently save the two Shield agents that were going to be killed. Well, at first, the lady in charge of all these guys is like, oh, see, he's on our side, he's the hero, he just saved my men. He immediately just uses the two Shield agents as flails and throws them right into Octo Squatchpool, which knocks him aside, which even the lady in charge is looking at it like going, eh. But basically, this does give the Host Rider another chance to get close to Octo Squatchpool and hold him in place so that he can get in the way of the convoy that's holding Dr. Zabo. And sure enough, the convoy ends up ramming right into Octo Squatchpool and ends up just crashing, and just falls apart. Thankfully, the interior is mostly left unscathed, so Zabo and the lady in charge of this platoon are okay. But that's when the Host Rider comes in and just rips them out of the thing. And while at first the lady's going, well, I'd like to thank you for being... Actually, does she actually say her name at this point? Hold on, I want to go check. Again, it just makes me nuts that... She does not. I don't think her name is ever said in the comic. And if it does, I'd feel annoyed. I feel bad that I missed it. My point is this: the lady in charge of all this at first thanks the Host Rider for his assistance in getting rid of all the interference with the convoy and for securing her men, and that she thinks they might not have meant to do anything. But the Host Rider tells her to shut up, and then apparently just sticks his tongue out at her head and wraps around it. And it's clearly weird, as you see some kind of surging as this happens, and when he pulls his tongue back, the lady is just kind of clearly shaken up, as the Host Rider talks about what he tasted from her, like a sense of justice, just a sense of justice, just a sense of a great sense of right and wrong, a noble soul, before he swats her aside, calling her disgusting. Yep, and as such, the Host Rider zeroes in on Dr. Zabo, and of course, he wants to know who the hell this is, because this is clearly not your average Ghost Rider. As such, the Host Rider begins expositing on his backstory, and sure enough, like I mentioned, in this universe, just like in the main Marvel Universe, in this reality, Robbie Reyes did end up binding with the soul of Eli, which in turn turned him into the Ghost Rider. And like in the main Marvel Universe, he tried to use this union. He tried to take advantage of this union as best he could to use his powers to help people whenever he could. Unfortunately for the good Mr. Reyes, he wound up unfortunately coming into contact with a second fiend, as the host writer calls it, the Venom symbiote, who immediately latched onto Robbie. Of course, Robbie, now wanting to play host to the alien pile of slime, immediately wound up shifting into his Ghost Rider form and tried to burn it off. But the Venom symbiote wasn't letting go easily, and thus and as a result, it led to like this three-way war between Eli, Robbie, and the Venom symbiote, as they all were just fighting for control. All of them resisting each other in some way, shape, or form, while trying to assert dominance over the body. And basically, in the midst of all this chaos, something happened. Now this isn't revealed until like maybe a couple pages later, but in the midst of all the fighting, the Venom symbiote and Eli realized something. They were stronger together. And as a result, Eli and the Venom symbiote wound up joining forces. I'm assuming that what happened is that just as Eli was able to bind himself to Robbie's soul, Eli was able to bind himself to the Venom symbiote, essentially turning this living pile of alien goo into a demonic alien pile of goo. And as a result, their combined forces managed to completely overtake Robbie Reyes. And the end result is what we see before us now, the Host Rider. While Robbie is still alive under there, as ultimately it's his body that the symbiote and Eli are using, Unfortunately for the good Mr. Reyes, he doesn't have his hand on the steering wheel, so to speak. At best, he is a passenger in his own body, while Eli and the symbiote do all the work. Of course, he's still fully conscious, and to try and keep him placated and to not get into that, and to make sure that he doesn't try fighting back against the Union, Eli and the symbiote do try to placate him. Well, I just said that. They try to appease him by not hurting innocents, by not killing innocents, which is why the Host Rider at least saved those men, even if he saved the SHIELD agents, even though he also used them as weapons and didn't end up killing them or the lady in charge of all this, because at the end of the day they were good guys. But ultimately Robbie's creed is don't kill the innocents. It didn't say anything about just knocking them away. Either way, the Host Rider completely overtook him, and nowadays he pretty much just roams the streets of New York, essentially seeking sinful souls. Why? Simple. To feast upon. Yeah, as the Host Rider exposits, he's not hunting criminals for the sake of justice like Robbie does. He has his own agenda when it comes to hunting monsters and bad guys, and put simply, he's here for food. Just as the Ghost Rider had the penance stare, which allowed him to turn the sins of his victims against them and burn their souls, the Host Rider has the penance kiss, wherein he extends his tongue into a potential target and literally sucks out their sin for nourishment. And that's the reason why the Host Rider is here at all. He wants Dr. Zabo's sin. Of course, as the Host Rider is expositing all this to him, Dr. Zabo doesn't seem afraid, which even the Host Rider notes. As such, he explains that Zabo says that in a minute, the Host Rider will be dead anyway. It's just a feeling he has in his bones. Which the Host Rider responds, "Oh yeah, you're talking about that deal you made with the mercenary Crossbones? Yeah, how do you think we even learned about this whole shindig?" At which point, the Host Rider gestures to his car, and it spits out the corpse of Crossbones. At this point, Dr. Zabo quickly realizes that his plan has gone south, and, well, he attempts to make a run for it, which the Host Rider does not allow him. It's also here where the Host Rider demonstrates how this three-way union works, as he shoots out a web chain to grab Dr. Zabo, the symbiote skin ends up peeling back and separates, showcasing Robbie inside just desperate, just looking kind of defeated. But on one side you can see the flaming skull of the Ghost Rider, and on the other side you can see the Venom's head as they all just kind of twist and writhe around the body. body. It's actually pretty fucking creepy. But as they pull Zabo in, they end up rejoining themselves. They end up reforming the whole Host Rider shindig. And sure enough, the Host Rider does exactly as he promised, as it enacts his penance kiss and siphons the sin right out of Dr. Zabo's soul. Which in turn ends up leaving the good doctor kind of a husk of a man. As such, while the Host Rider just begins mockingly saying, "Oh, what, you didn't like our penance kiss? That's so hurtful. But we understand we're not going to get hung up on minor scruples like that. At least let us drive you home." Before he just throws Dr. Zabo's body to his car so that it can feast upon it. So, yeah. Death, destruction, carnage, and flaming skullhead man. Sounds like a good day's work, right? Well, but the Host Rider sadly doesn't have a chance to revel in his victory because he suddenly starts feeling strange, thinking that something isn't right. And sure enough, like with Laura in the first issue, he begins kind of convulsing as suddenly he and his car are disappear in a big swirly vortex. And when they reappear, it's still on the street that they were on, but like with Laura, who reappeared in a more decrepit version of the bank vault that she had been hiding in, the Host Rider reappears in what looks like a more decrepit version of the street he was just fighting in. Only again, there are no shield cars, there are no unconscious shield agents, no mercenaries or monsters that he fought. It's just by himself, at least at first. And while the Host Rider at first begins getting angry and saying whoever brought him here will feel their full ire, we soon see that the Host Rider is greeted by another individual, the venomized Captain America from the end of issue 1, who tells him don't ask what your symbiote can do for you, but what you can do for your symbiote. And so that's where the issue ends. So, my thoughts on issue 3 of Edge of Venomverse. This shit is fucking insane. I am not kidding. Issue 3 of Edge of Venomverse seems to have one bottom line. Be metal as fuck. And if I can just say one thing, I think it pulls it off spectacularly. The whole comic is just fucking insane. There is not a moment that feels like that they said, let's try and tone it down. Instead, they just go balls to the walls crazy right off the gate. They hit the ground running, and they do not stop till they reach the end of the book. And quite frankly, I like that. I genuinely like that. While I typically usually get annoyed with stories that don't stop to give you a break, I feel like we do still have some kind of way of splitting up the action with the reactions of the characters in the story. Specifically, the lady who is in charge of this shield team, as we see her reacting to all the strange crazies and baddies that are attacking their convoy as they're transporting Dr. Zabo. And basically, she has the same reaction that most other people have. Like, what the hell's that? What's going on? What's that? And Dr. Zabo, and we kind of get some nice humor as Dr. Zabo just calmly explains who and what each of these things are, and one by one, and while he does, and it just kind of, at least in a way, it's kind of amusing just seeing him all nonchalant and relaxed as all this insane shit is happening outside his convoy. And when you actually see the carnage going on outside the convoy, it's just crazy, just over the top, balls to the walls insanity. And I know I keep saying balls to the walls, but it's insane. Balls to the walls, insane. And it just gets even more so as you keep hearing more of what else is coming. You got the fucking Magia. You got vampires riding in dune buggies. You got mutated eggplants who think that Dr. Zabo is their god. So fucking Octo Squatch Pool, which even in universe, everyone thinks that name is stupid. But it's just so freaking insane, and it just feels like you're just looking at this and you look at this and just think, what the hell am I reading? And it stays that way throughout the whole story, especially when the Host Rider comes in. Like I said, the Host Rider is one of the most balls to the walls metal ass characters to appear in this book, and he's fucking awesome! Like with the Ghost Rider, he immediately has that visual flair with having the flaming skull head and riding on this demonic car right into the middle of this chaos. But then you have the added flair of combining the visual motifs of the Ghost Rider with the visual motifs of the Venom symbiote. You see him buffer. You see the design of his tracksuit with the spider legs in it. You see the flaming skull head, except with the venomized tongue slithering out of it. You see how he controls the flame, how he wraps the chains around him like his webbing, to the point where he actually shoots the chains out of his wrists like webbing. He even does the hand thing. That is insanely awesome. You cannot tell me that is not cool and crazy and insane. And the way it's designed, it looks like he's ripped straight from the cover of a rock album. In fact, I'm going to showcase one of my favorite bits of artwork in the comic, and I think really showcases just how metal the character is. It's this page right here. The visual sequence of Robbie Reyes bonding with the Venom symbiote and his, Eli, and the symbiote's attempt to gain control. It looks so, again, metal. Just the way it's drawn, the use of colors, the flames mixing with the symbiote, with Robbie's pained expression mixed in. It all looks so damn cool, and I can't help but love it, especially when by the end, when we learn how the Ghost Rider typically feeds, how he hunts criminals not because he wants to serve out justice, but because he literally eats sin. That is again, insanely creepy. And it makes him even more terrifying, because this showcases that this guy is not about justice. He's not about protecting the innocent. The only reason he doesn't kill any innocents is because that's literally the only bit of dominance that Robbie is able to assert over this thing, to not kill the innocents. Otherwise he's perfectly okay with having cannon fodder. We see it in the battle happen in the battle as the Ghost Rider ends up using his web chains to grab a couple shield agents and use them as flails against Octosquatch Pool. And likewise, when he reaches Dr. Zabo and the lady in charge of this thing, he immediately gets a taste of the lady and her sins. And when he realizes, oh, you're not a good meal, he just swats her aside. He doesn't give a shit about protecting her. He doesn't give a shit about protecting S.H.I.E.L.D. He's here for one goal: find the big bad guy and eat his sin, and then when you're done with that, feed his body to your car. That is what he is here for. And that's terrifying. It's very terrifying, and kind of it makes him feel like a monster in a sense. And when you learn his backstory and his whole deal, it makes him even scarier. And it adds an even greater sense of tragedy to the whole thing. Because here's the thing: when it comes to the Ghost Rider, one of the things that one of the deals with his character is the fight between the man and the monster. After all, like I said, the Ghost Rider only gets his powers because it's a human soul bound to a demonic one. And and ultimately, what makes him a hero is how the Ghost Rider tries to use these powers and use them, and ultimately turn them for the forces of good, protecting innocents, saving lives, and so on and so forth. And we've seen that with Robbie, and we've seen that with Robbie. And when it comes to him and Eli, you can see there is a tenuous relationship. As Eli was, like I said, he was a Satanist. He was a monster. He cares very little for anybody but himself. And even in the comics, at one point, he tried doing that. He wound up trying to target Robbie's younger brother and make him a viable host, and when that didn't work, he managed to trick Robbie into killing someone, which made their bond permanent. And the only reason Robbie allowed it was because he would only allow Eli to kill the most heinous of souls he could find. And ultimately, which, again, that's still Robbie trying to just do the right thing and use this curse to benefit others. But then you learn the story of how the Ghost Rider was formed, and how ultimately the Ghost Rider the only role that Robbie plays in the Ghost Rider, aside from keeping him from killing innocents, is that he's just the body. He's the baseline that Eli and the symbiote are working from. He is the one that they have to be a part of. He is the one that they need to take control. And at the end of the day, he's a prisoner of his own body. Imagine, if you will, just watching from behind as your body is being controlled by both a demon and an alien parasite, all of whom are just causing this reckless chaos and destruction, and all you can do is just watch and pray that they don't kill any innocent people. It's honest to God, honest to God is sad. And the way, and when the symbiote, and when the Host Rider briefly opens up and briefly peels back the whole symbiote skin, and the symbiote skin, you see Robbie Reyes beneath. He looks like a broken man. It looks like he doesn't even want to see what he's doing anymore. Like, he's just looking away. And basically, and here's what's happening. Basically, we see what happens is that we see Dr. Zabo running away, and then he peels back, and then the skin peels back as the Host Rider shoots out a web chain to get Zabo, and you see Robbie just looking down, just going, "Don't kill the innocents, please don't kill the innocents." And even as he pulls Zabo in, he's just not looking. It's like he's just trying everything in his power to distance himself from his current situation. And honestly, who would blame him? He's literally lost control of his body to monsters, and he has no say in what goes on beyond the barest minimum. It's honest to God sad, and the way it's portrayed, it genuinely feels like he has succumbed to a monster, especially with how the Host Rider just talks about how he only wanted Zabo so he could feast on his sin. And when you saw how the Host Rider reacted to dealing with innocent people, it's clear that there is no shred of goodness in him. He is only doing this for his own benefit, and he clearly is taking joy in the pain and suffering he's providing. Hell, at one point, going back to that scene where we saw Robbie underneath, we see the Host Rider expositing about how, we found we didn't need him at the end. He three's a crowd for all, but we keep him around for old time's sake. And while most of the time he's not proper nourishment, sometimes he has nightmares. That's honest to God terrifying. Ultimately he's only kept around because they just need that baseline, and that they find just simple joy and pleasure in tormenting him by having him be a part of all this. It's creepy and tragic and just terrifying all at once, and I think it really works for the character. It makes you feel sorry for him while also making you fear for what this thing is capable of, what it will do, what it wants to do, and ultimately just makes you wonder how it'll play into the larger event with Venomverse, because ultimately it is still a Venom. The Host Rider is still technically this world's Venom, as one part of this equation is the Venom symbiote, so it is still playing it is still a part of the whole thing. But with the story that we're presented, it does make you wonder. It does really makes you afraid of what he's capable of, but the story itself, I think, does an awesome job at showcasing that. The story itself, I think, is the best part of the whole thing. The Host Rider, on top of just seeing the balls-to-walls insanity of bringing all these insane forces and creatures together just to get this one guy. And what makes it even better, too, is the artwork. The artwork definitely exemplifies just how metal this whole scenario is. From the colors used, the designs, the pencils, the way the bad guys look, even again, how the Host Rider looks. It looks all so fucking metal and insane, and I kind of can't help but love it. And as a result, I think issue 3 is probably just a badass time all around, and quite frankly, if you're a Ghost Rider fan and you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's kick-ass all the way, has a lot of is enjoyable in its own right, definitely has enough tragedy and spooks and scares to showcase just how much of a badass motherfucker, just how much of a monster the Host Rider truly is, and overall, I think is probably just it's just an awesome issue. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you again on Saturday as we take a look at issue 4 of Edge of Venomverse. And I finally get a chance to talk further about the Old Man Logan universe. Kind of, sort of. We'll get to that when we get to that. But until then, I hope you have a good day. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll hopefully see you on Saturday. Take care.